Good morning and welcome. We begin with the forever connection South Florida will have to every school where a mass shooter is able to get in and leave ruins in his wake. In the days since that happened in Winder, Georgia this week, a split-screen moment. Likely no one in South Florida watched the terror at Appalachia High School unfold without thinking of the terror at Marjory Stoneman Douglas unfolding 6.5 years ago. That catastrophe led to unprecedented steps toward gun safety in a very conservative Florida state government, likely because the profound pain and outrage was right there in Tallahassee firsthand. It was a Democrat state representative and Stoneman Douglas alum Jared Moskowitz who led the way and ended a gut-wrenching floor speech on his gun bill like this.
You don't need to stand with me. I don't need you to stand with me. I need you to stand with the families. Push the green button. Thank you.
And they did. Jared Moskowitz is now a congressman representing South Florida's District 23, heading back to D.C. this week with the standing to be the lead on any gun safety debate. Congressman Moskowitz, great to have you on the program this morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we wanted to start with a little bit of breaking news. The Broward School District, BSO, has arrested someone for making a social media threat to a very specific Broward school this morning. And I don't know if you know much about that, but in light of the week's events and the conversation we're about to have, I wanted to hear you weigh in on that.
Yeah, well, look, I don't know the veracity of the threats, but nowadays you cannot go ahead on social media and make threats against a school because we no longer treat that as a joke. That gets treated as if in every case it is serious. Because it is, based on what's going on, not just around the country, but what literally happened in our county at my hometown, at the school I graduated from, which is a mile from my house, Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. And so I'm glad BSO rightfully went and arrested that individual. It's why we have the crimes unit that looks at this within BSO. We've invested both state and federal dollars into the real crime unit to do that. And it's why the Marjory Stoneman Douglas School Safety Bill that we passed in Florida on a bipartisan basis is so important, because it gave law enforcement these tools to react quickly when we see these threats made online.
And I want to sort of bring that into the news of the week and exactly what you're talking about, because since, well, let's just, this year alone, 385 mass shootings. And since the shooting at Douglas High, 3,734 mass shootings. As you go back to Congress with your colleagues this week, do those numbers have any significance at all at the Capitol?
I mean, they have a significance to me, who watched family members and parents bury their loved ones and their kids, put them in the ground, and dads that didn't come home, husbands, 14-year-olds. So yeah, that has significance to me. The problem is my colleagues on the other aisle don't. They're beholden to a special interest. They're beholden to lobbying money on this issue rather than the humanity of the issue. And I'm for the Second Amendment. I'm for a robust Second Amendment, but that doesn't mean we can't have common sense regulations and rules like we have here in Florida, by the way.
Exactly, and that's kind of what I was getting at, because Florida, it's still a very conservative state, just like it was 6 years ago, and passed these, I mean, it wasn't monumental, but it was unprecedented, and it was the kinds of steps that really have been making a difference, especially the red flag laws that have been used so many times that go to the person and not the weapon. And why not take Florida as a role model and take those kind of steps on a national level?
Well, look, it took us a while to get to those steps, right? We had the Pulse shooting, we had the Fort Lauderdale Airport shooting, and then we had Parkland. But I always give my colleagues across the aisle credit. I do think it was a historic step in Florida, and pretty monumental if you compare what we've done at the federal level, or even at some states. I mean, we raised the age to 21 here in Florida 4 years before New York, the state of New York, did that. Red flag laws, as you mentioned, 3-day waiting periods, hundreds of millions of dollars for school resource officers and mental health counselors. We have dedicated mental health counselors now dealing with our high schools to identify this up, threat assessments, so that if there are kids that are making threats, they get an assessment. Parents' right to know. Parents have a right to know if there's something going on in their classroom. And then making sure our school perimeters are completely or safer than they were before Parkland. So this is all about mitigation. And Florida's the model. There are no protests in the street for people who can't go buy guns in the state. We have permitless carry here in the state of Florida. So if you want to be able to get a gun here, you can get a gun here, no problem in Florida. That's why you don't see people banging on the door saying you're infringing upon my Second Amendment rights. But yet we have common sense rules like red flag laws, which have been used 19,000 times in 6 years. Let me say that again. 19,000 times law enforcement has deemed someone a danger to themselves or a danger to others, right? Suicide, domestic violence, a veteran suffering mental health, or a student, in this case, threatening to shoot up a school, has taken their weapons away. They get due process. They get to go in front of a judge and say, no, it was a mistake, right? So that their rights aren't infringed upon. But this is how we're keeping communities safer than we were before Parkland. And it is a model for both Georgia or Texas or any other states that have suffered these problems. Those are conservative states. This state is run completely by one party, and yet they did the right thing and people are safer for it.
Yeah. So on Wednesday, you had tweeted, "I refuse to do nothing." Does that mean that there's a plan? Are you heading to Washington with something in mind?
Well, again, right, it's like what I said after Parkland, right? The idea to do nothing. Nothing, we can't find one thing, like one thing. How about mental health, or how about school safety? We can't even agree on that. I mean, obviously, I think red flag laws would be the most palpable, acceptable thing that we could roll out nationwide, because that's not, law-abiding citizens. These are people who are about to harm someone.
Yeah.
Okay. There are signs that they're either about to harm themselves, harm their spouse or loved one, or go out and do something in the community based on evidence that's being assembled. That's why you red flag them. And so I think that's something that we should be talking about. It's not going to stop all crime. It's not going to stop all shootings. This idea that, we can't stop it all, so why should we do nothing? Well, then I guess we should get rid of all our laws, right? I guess we should, the reason we have crimes against murder, laws against murder, is because we don't want that to happen. It doesn't mean that we're going to prevent all of it. So this idea that we should do nothing, which is literally what the other side has been pushing on for years now, I just find so defeatist and unacceptable. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to get something done in the 118th Congress. You've seen what this Congress has looked like. The most unproductive Congress in over 50 years. We've passed, a tenth of the bills that other Congresses have passed. We're no longer doing the business of the American people, lowering the cost of healthcare, lowering the cost of living, making communities safer. No, it's all about messaging bills and fakeness and shows and fake impeachments and all of that jazz. So, maybe if the 119th Congress can get their act together, we can actually work together on a bipartisan basis to do stuff for the American people.
Well, speaking of elections in November, timing is everything, and timing largely is why March of 2018, your gun bills, really got through a conservative legislature. So talk about timing presently. Do you think that because of Winder, because of what may be another in the next couple of weeks, will this be an issue to voters?
Look, the bills got through the state legislature in the House and the Senate, and the governor signed it for a lot of reasons that were going on. One is that we had these several mass events 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
Two is we had the parents and the family members who had just buried their loved ones come up to Tallahassee and become lobbyists immediately. We had the students come up. But there's one particular item that doesn't get talked about a lot, is that there were relationships and friendships across the aisle, Democrats and Republicans. And Republicans not from this area came down to see the school, what it looked like when your school gets turned into a war zone. And we agreed that there were certain things that we weren't going to do, but we tried to find a middle ground. And we agreed on one principle, which is whatever we pass, it would have had to prevent what happened in Parkland. And it was because of those relationships, right? And also because we don't have the national media in Tallahassee driving us apart, or social media, that we were able to actually put our differences aside and get some middle ground legislation done. That's why it's so hard to get it done in Washington. You heard even Rick Scott say he supports the state law, but he doesn't want to do it on a federal level.
I think and so, you just laid out a blueprint for what needs to be done. I hope someone up there is listening.
Well, look, there are relationships up there, but everyone's got to get out of their corner. I'm not going to get everything I want. And I understood that in Tallahassee when I helped draft that bill. But they also need to move. This idea of doing nothing should no longer be acceptable. There is a medium ground of making sure people have their rights under the Second Amendment and making sure communities are safe from people who are a danger to themselves or a danger to others. In this case in Georgia, this kid was a danger. He was threatening to shoot up schools, right? He was questioned by local law enforcement. And his father thought, oh, I know what I'm going to do. The way to deal with that is let me go get him the gun. And then he bought him literally the AR-15 style weapon that he then used to commit the shooting that he was threatening that he was going to do. Okay. And now the father has been arrested, rightfully so.
Yeah.
But that's why we should have laws to make sure that parents are held accountable if they give their kid a gun who's threatening to shoot up a school. I mean, this is the most egregious of egregious cases that I can really remember.
Yeah.
Well,
we'll see.
It's why we got to find common ground.
100%. I can't imagine anybody would disagree with how you frame that argument. And Congressman, we look forward to what you do in Washington this week, and please do keep in touch with us on that. Appreciate your time, as always.
Thank you.
And next, one of the most important local races that may not be getting your attention for the man or woman who will take charge of your free and fair elections. A candidates debate is next.